What is up, you guys, and welcome back to the Aussie Grid Girl podcast. I'm so sorry that it has been a couple of weeks since I uploaded a video / recorded a podcast. As you guys know, we are halfway through the summer break now. It is almost time for race time. So I'm hoping that this kind of comes at the perfect time. But again, I am really sorry that I didn't get this up straight after Spa. It's been a busy couple of weeks in my world personally. If you follow me on TikTok, you would have been a part of my day in the life of a content creator TikTok that I did, where I took you guys around in my day of my burlesque show. I also apologize in advance for that beeping that you can hear in the background. The battery on my NBN box is dying, and I haven't been able to get a replacement yet. It's been organized though. I'm just waiting for it to arrive. So I apologize for the beeping that will occasionally pop up. I also probably should have organized this better, because as you can see over this shoulder, you can see my vacuum cleaner. But at least you guys know that my house is clean, so that's one thing. We're going to talk about the Hungarian Grand Prix and the Spa, the Belgian Grand Prix in this episode. And then towards the end, we might do a little quick talk about the summer break and silly season. However, silly season doesn't really seem to have started just yet. So I guess we're going to have to save that for another episode of the podcast, which again is why I've kind of left it a little bit of a gap in between, because now we've got 2 weeks. This is kind of 2 weeks after the last race, 2.5 weeks, I'm sorry. And then the next episode, I'll probably do one episode straight after the Netherlands. But it all depends on how busy I get, because I've got some really exciting things happening in my life at the moment, which I'm hoping that I can share with you guys really soon. But I am just waiting on confirmation from a couple of those things before I'm allowed to talk about it. But hopefully there is some exciting stuff happening for me. If there is anything exciting happening in your life right now, leave it down in the comments below on this YouTube video. Or if you are just listening to the podcast, there's some ASMR for you, some terrible ASMR. If you guys are just listening to the podcast, hit me up on my social media, which I will drop the links to my social media at the end. So let's get into it. Please excuse me while I get into my phone to look at my notes so we can talk about it. Let's just all appreciate my phone wallpaper right now. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's the thing that happened, my phone wallpaper. Sorry, not sorry. I kind of lost a bet. No, I'm kidding. I didn't lose a bet. I just chose to have that as my wallpaper. I really enjoyed Charles's caption on that photo when he posted it on an Instagram about his life jacket being too small. That was kind of the reason why I wanted it as my wallpaper. Plus, it's really funny when I'm on public transport and like people are looking over my shoulder at my phone screen, and they see that picture of Charles. And if they are not if they're not an F1 fan, or they're not like aware of who he is, it's kind of funny. I actually had a little old lady ask me if the boy on my phone background was my boyfriend a little while ago, and that was when I had a photo of Lando Norris as my wallpaper, which amused me to no end, because I am I'm 7 years older than Lando, so that would be a little bit weird if I was dating him. Also, he is Lando Norris, a very handsome young man, and I am me. You can take that as you will. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about the Hungarian Grand Prix and the return of Daniel freaking Ricciardo. And what a return it was. He had a great race in Hungary. It was a great race for the Australians in Hungary. Oscar Piastri, I'm looking at you. He was absolutely amazing in Hungary. He was so close to being on pole. So close. I'm so proud of him. He absolutely smashed it. Or am I getting confused, and was he on pole in Spa? Oh no, I think he was on pole in Spa, but that's okay. I'm still proud of him. I don't know what McLaren did to their cars. Well, I probably do know. I don't know what they did during the break between Silverstone and Hungary, but holy crap. Both of those cars were absolute rocket ships around the track in Budapest, which is one of my favorite. The Hungaroring is one of my favorite tracks on the calendar. I know I've talked about this a lot about my favorite tracks. Monaco is one of my favorites because it's a classic. Albert Park is one of my favorites on the track because I'm from Melbourne. And the Red Bull Ring is probably my favorite of all of the tracks. But I do appreciate the Hungaroring as well. That's a pretty nice. It's a little nice little piece of asphalt. There was. It was a weird race, Hungary, let's be honest. There was a lot of weird shit happening. Weird crap happening. Dad, I know you watch. I'm sorry, I swear so much. There was a lot of stuff happening, weird stuff in terms of pit stops. In Hungary, Yuki had a really, really terrible pit stop, and Daniel did have a couple of weird pit stops that weren't really that came really quite quickly, one after the other. But he was saying on team radio that it was because the hard tire just wasn't working for him. So that was why he went back in and changed his tires. Which is great. I think it's really good that he has that kind of experience where he can talk about the fact that he knows what he's doing in the car, considering it was his first time properly driving that car. And it's a car that has been built around Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries, who are really quite short. I am 5'2.5". I am about half a centimeter taller than Yuki Tsunoda. About half a centimeter. It might be a little bit less than that. But again, I'm quite short. So I know just what that difference is between Yuki and Daniel in terms of the car. There was the whole thing with Zhou Guanyu and his 5-second penalty. Kind of everybody seemed to be outperforming, just outperforming their teams in their pit stops. There was a couple of really, really terrible pit stops in Hungary, and it wasn't just Ferrari. That's how I feel about that. There is so much that I could say about the Ferrari pit stops in Hungary, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. I've actually written in my notes here, Carlos and Charles calling their own strategy with their tires, which they were a little bit. Carlos, particularly on radio, was seeming very much in control of when he was going to box and when he wasn't. I think it's great when they let the drivers have more of an opinion, especially with the way that things are going with Ferrari at the moment. Yeah, it also says on my notes, yes, Charles. So I'm always happy when he does well. Hungary wasn't a great outing for him, but it wasn't a terrible outing either. And Lewis clearly outperformed his car. For pole position, it was obvious with his pace during the race, which kind of seemed to drop off relatively quickly. It didn't take Max long to get past. And then obviously Lando absolutely killed it. I'm so proud. That's 2 Lando podiums in a row, Silverstone and Hungary. There is a lot more in that McLaren than I think we think there is, so I wouldn't be surprised in the 10 races or so that we have left, Lando is on the podium in a fair few of those. We will talk about the podium, the Hungary podium, in a moment. If you watch the race, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the end of the race. Perez was getting his elbows out a fair bit in Hungary, which he really needed to do. He had a poor showing in qualifying again. So he really did need to kind of get his crap together. And I believe he might have got I think he got driver of the day in Hungary. It was a very long time ago. I'm so sorry. I need to take better notes or just record these closer together. I apologize. You don't come here anyway for me to be on point. You guys come here because I do stutter sometimes, and I don't always come across the clearest. So I apologize for that. And then just Charles getting a 5-second penalty for speeding in pit lane was kind of just the icing on the cake on a terrible race for Ferrari. The terrible race for Charles that was Hungary. But yes, I digress. I could do a whole episode, I'm sure, on Charles outperforming his Ferrari and the poor strategy calls that Ferrari make. But maybe we'll save that for another time. I might make a little compilation video at the end of the season for Ferrari fails. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that. And then it also kind of just says in big capital letters in my notes, it just says Lando, which is essentially me the entire time during the race. Me and my lovely friend Aram, who is from Belgium. Hi, I know you watch and I know you listen. She and I, basically our Twitter back and forth to each other during Grand Prix is just like, we just repeat Lando's name, basically. Back and forth to each other, and then sometimes we throw Charlotte in there too, but most of the time it is Lando. But that's just because we're just really proud. I'm really proud of Lando. I've been watching him, since his first season in McLaren in 2019, and kind of watching him grow and just get better and better and better. And yeah, so it was nice to have him back on the podium in Hungary. And as I've said in my notes, the Mercedes really seemed to come alive towards the end of the race, when their fuel is lower, both Lewis and George with good pace in the latter parts of the race in Hungary. It is both a shame and a blessing that Lewis did not do better during the race, but the Mercedes, I think, in terms of cars that are kind of catching up with Red Bull in terms of pace, the Mercedes could be there. I feel like there's some things that just need to be updated a little bit, and things need to be changed on that car to kind of improve its performance, but we'll see what they've got up to over the summer break and what they come to Zandvoort with in a couple of weeks. For some reason, Aston Martin have kind of just completely dropped off, which is... It's upsetting. I enjoy seeing Fernando Alonso do well just because it's Fernando and he's been in the sport pretty much since I started watching when I was a kid. So that's always exciting. So let's talk about the podium in Hungary. One of the girls that I follow on Twitter, Katya, she tweeted about the trophies being porcelain, and I think I replied to her on Twitter and I said I would not be trusted around a porcelain trophy because I'm quite I am quite clumsy, so I would probably trip over and destroy it. So speaking of trophies getting destroyed, god damn it, Lando Norris. God damn it, Lando. I was sitting there watching the podium celebrations at the end of the race and I was like, did his trophy just fall over? Because I thought it was Lando's. And then I went back and I had a closer look at it, and no, it was not Lando's trophy, it was Max's. Congratulations, Lando, you are a klutz, and I love you for it. It was a funny moment, and I'm really... Look, let's all be adults about this. He didn't break the trophy on purpose. There were so many people that I saw online that were saying that he did it on purpose. He didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. Him and Max were laughing about it afterwards. Max thought it was funny. Like, it's a joke, people. He didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. Move on. He has since apologized to the people that made the trophy, and I believe a replacement trophy is being organized. Either that or Lando and Zach needed to get at that trophy with some super glue during the summer break. But it was an accident. It was a funny moment, and it'll probably go down as one of the funniest podiums of the season, depending on what happens in the next half of the season. Speaking of, before we move on from Hungary, you guys will notice, or maybe you won't, I now have, you can't really see it in this light, I now have, when my camera decides to focus, I now have dark red hair. The reason for my dark red hair, well, actually, I was going to do it anyway, but the reason for my dark red hair was, and if you follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you would have seen me post this, and Threads as well. If you follow me on those platforms, you would have seen my video on TikTok as well, where I said, if Lando or Charles podium in Silverstone, I will dye my hair red. Now, as I said, I was going to be doing that anyway. I was kind of bored of the blonde and I needed to change. But for now, we are blaming Lando Norris for my poor life choices. Although it isn't really a poor life choice. My hair kind of looks purple in this light because of the blue light here, so that's how you can tell that it is red. The point is, I did say that I was going to dye my hair after Silverstone if Lando was on the podium, so this is what happened. I'm really happy with it. I'm enjoying being a redhead. Redheads have more fun than blondes do. It's just true. I also have my lovely cup here that I'm going to hope that Trent cuts this out. Just the me drinking part. But this is my cup, and it says my blood type is coffee. And inside this cup, I'm not going to tip it because I'll end up pouring it over my laptop. There is iced coffee. It is currently 10:25 p.m. when I'm recording this. Probably not a good idea to be drinking iced coffee at 10:30 at night. But I digress. I'm doing it anyway. It's too late to turn back now. I've had about half of it. I'm very hyperactive. I'm sure you guys have worked that out. I also talk with my hands a lot. Really sorry, I'm quite gesticulative when I talk. It is kind of my version of max-splaining, I suppose. Which, by the way, max-splaining is still one of my favorite words. I need everybody in the comments or to tweet me on social media, or to tweet me or message me on Instagram or tweet me or send me a thing on Threads and like at me on Threads. I need you guys to come up with your best like versions of max-splaining for the other drivers. I think it is Leclarifying is the Charles version of max-splaining. I could be wrong. If you have better ideas or if you have other versions, please let me know what they are. I would love to hear them for all of the drivers that you can think of. And then we come to Spa, everybody. And Spa is one of those weird... You know what? I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say it's a weird track. I'm going to say it is a nice track. However, it is quite an emotional and comes with a really dark kind of past and a kind of quite recent past as well. Obviously, we had the tragic, awful passing of Delano Van 't Hoff at Spa a little while ago, and an 18-year-old aspiring driver. We had Antoine Hubert a few years ago. There's way too much death at Spa. I really think they need to look at what kind of conditions they do race in on that track. We weirdly got a dry race in Spa this year, which was... It's always strange to see a dry race there because you kind of always expect it to be wet and nasty. The F2 race wasn't quite as smooth. There was a moment, a little bit of a moment with Arthur Leclerc where he did very well to save his car from hitting the barriers because of some dangerous driving by one of the other drivers in the F2. I can't remember who it was. I'm so sorry. I really should make notes for the F2 races and talk about those as well. But maybe that's the thing that we can do next season. We can talk about F2 and F1 and F3 because there's a couple of the F3 drivers that make me like howl. Thank you, Prema. The Prema YouTube channel. Everybody needs to go and subscribe and follow that because their videos are fantastic. Thank you, Angelina. I love you. But I digress. Again, we're going to talk about Spa. Spa was a sprint weekend. I wasn't really sure how it was going to work at Spa. If they didn't get qualifying, it was going to be in championship order, except Max would have started P6 because he had a 5-place grid penalty for his, I want to say it was his gearbox. I'm pretty sure it was his gearbox. He's exhausted his supply of those and used an extra one. So the Spa sprint, I think that we just want to say, Oscar bloody Piastri, you little beauty. He was so close to being on pole. So close. I was so proud of him. I was so proud of him. He absolutely smashed it. And just going back through the race for a second on the F1 app when it decides to load. Also, I know I need to have more light, okay, guys? I'm sorry. My strip lights that you can see here, mostly blue, kind of pink on this side. I need to get new ones, okay? I just haven't got around to it just yet. Told you, there's some stuff happening in my life at the moment. So, yeah, we did have Oscar P2, and he drove that car to the bloody limit. Lando, I think he picked up damage in qualifying, in the first part of qualifying to his floor. So his wasn't quite as good. In saying that, he was P5. Did start the race in P4 because of the penalty. I believe it was for the race that Charles was on pole. Yeah. So Max had the penalty in the race, not in the sprint. So if they didn't get qualifying in on Friday, because of the rain, they were going to do it in championship order, which means Max would have started 6th, which didn't end up happening. We did just get normal qualifying, so Max still started. So for the sprint race, Max did start on pole with Oscar in P2 and Carlos in P3. And the sprint race was so much fun. I do love sprint weekends. I think sprint races are great. I just think they do need to pick kind of their battles in which tracks they're going to have sprint races at. I'd personally like to see the sprint race back at Monza, because a sprint race at Monza is always going to be a good thing, especially when Daniel Ricciardo's around. Speaking of Daniel Ricciardo in the sprint race, he was this close to being in the points. George Russell. George did drive really well, though, in the sprint race. So, that was kind of, a really good thing about it. We did have Fernando DNFing. Again, I don't like not seeing Fernando do well. It kind of makes me a little bit sad. It also actually says in my notes here, what is it with Mercs putting holes in Red Bulls on sprint weekends? Lewis Hamilton, I'm looking at you. He had his contact with Checo and put a hole in Checo's car, so he also did not finish the race, neither did Fernando. It was, however, a good result for the Alpine boys, with both of them finishing, and with Pierre being P3. And speaking of the podium for the sprint race, Oscar Piastri, people, on the podium in his 12th F1 race. On the podium in his 12th F1 race. And I know that he himself said it's not really a race, it's a sprint race, so I don't know if it counts as being on the podium. Oscar, it counts as being on the podium, kiddo. I'm sorry, but 12 races in, and Oscar has already blown Logan Sargent and Nick de Vries. Obviously, Nick isn't there anymore, but Piastri has blown Logan Sargent out of the water for Rookie of the Year. Like, he is absolutely smashing it. Now that the McLaren is so much better with the upgrades, holy baloney. Holy baloney. It's going to be a good rest of the season for them. And then, obviously, as well, we had Pierre he does host a run for Antoine, that he did on I think it was on Friday. He invited the grid to join him for a run around the track. It was not just the F1 drivers, it was the F2 drivers and the F3 drivers, and it was the support crews. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. And also the flowers that he left for Antoine, it says, I'll prove them wrong, the little note. And he did. He got P3 in the sprint race. And I always want to see Pierre do well. I wish that he was still at either AlphaTauri. I wish he was back in a Red Bull, to be honest. I don't think he really got his fair go there. But as has been proven by Helmut Marko and, axing Nick de Vries, it's brutal. And if you mess up kind of once, then that's sort of it. Which is a shame, because Pierre just has so much potential. But let's just hope that it means that with everything that's going on in terms of Alpine now, they did have both of their cars finish the race, which was so nice to see, considering we had 2 double DNFs from them in the previous 2 races. So we did get to see them finish. And then we had a dry race at Spa, like what the hell, when we go to the feature race on Sunday. And we had the amazing high of Oscar Piastri being in P2 and finishing P2 in the sprint race to the feature race, where he should have been on the front row and where he should have done really well. And just a side note here before I go off on a tangent about Oscar, Charles being on pole without getting pole is the most Charles Leclerc thing to ever Charles Leclerc. I'm sorry, but we all know it. Like, him being on pole without actually having to be on pole, having to get pole because of Max and his penalty. just makes me laugh so hard. Although he wasn't that far behind in qualifying, I don't think officially anyway. So I think it was still quite, it was quite close. Q3, 146.1 was what Max did, and 146.9 is what Charles did. So it was pretty close. Charles himself was even saying that he could have got more out of the car, he thinks, during qualifying, but he got stuck with traffic. That's another thing that they need to kind of look at to sort of avoid that. Like, I get that they all have to, you know, just do their best to get the best times, but traffic is always something that's going to be an issue. You know, and it, you know, you saw what happened with Nico Hülkenberg. He also got stuck with traffic in qualifying and didn't actually qualify. I think his lap time got deleted, so he started the race from the back. And then Daniel Ricciardo also got his lap time deleted and ended up starting 19th. Spa wasn't as good a race for him as the Hungaroring was, but there are tracks that are going to be suited to Daniel. We all know that he does amazing at Monza. He's been on the podium there before, so hopefully this time around Monza will be a good race for him. And then we've also got Zandvoort, which I think Daniel does. I think he could do quite well around Zandvoort in the AlphaTauri. Speaking of the AlphaTauri, actually no, hold that thought. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. We're going to talk about this at the end after I've talked about the race. So speaking of the race, Charles Leclerc back on the podium again. Yay! I'm so proud. It was the race. I don't want to say it was boring, but it wasn't the most exciting race. There was obviously the contact quite early between Carlos and Oscar, which, if you are very active on social media as I am, especially on Twitter and Instagram, you would see that Carlos was pointing the finger at Oscar for that incident. I personally think it was a racing incident, but if you look at it from the other point of view, Oscar had nowhere to go. He got squeezed up against the wall. There was nowhere for him to go. Carlos had space on the other side while he was overtaking Hamilton and chose instead to take the line and sort of squish Oscar against the wall, which I think if you go back and look at it, I don't think he really realised how close he was, and I think his perspective might have been off about the situation of how close he was to Hamilton on the other side and how he could have avoided that. I don't really know why they kept the Ferrari going during the race. I think they said afterwards that they were hoping for a safety car to kind of, or a red flag to kind of have a look at his car and maybe fix some things on it to improve it. But they did keep it out for way too long, and I don't really understand why. When he was, you know, he was in P19 at the time, and the car just, you could see that it wasn't going anywhere. Like, it wasn't going anywhere. Like, he was getting overtaken so easily by everybody else. And I'm not going to say specific drivers because it was everybody else. And it was just kind of a waste, putting miles on the car for no reason that they didn't need to do. There was some awful pit stops from McLaren as well. I don't know what's going on with pit stops. I hope people spent the summer break looking into that, because at the elite level that these guys are at, the pit stops shouldn't be as long as some of them are. Especially when you look and there's people that are like doing 1.9 second pit stops, which is ridiculous. But you see that happening and you're like, okay, so everybody else kind of needs to get back and practice some more and sort of work out why it's not working for them. Max breezed past Lewis and then Charles and was just like, bye guys. Even though he started P6, it was very easy for him to get past, and was just like, again, the Red Bull is a goddamn rocket. The DRS is just, it makes such a difference. Hopefully when the regulations change again, the competition will be a little bit closer. Although on the flip side of that, everybody else just needs to be better. Like, I'm sorry, but you can only say that it's the car so much. The last several races, I'm not going to include Spa in this because Checo did amazing. But the last, handful of races, Checo's in the same machinery that Max is in. And as much as people want to say online that it's a conspiracy, that, everything's always going to benefit Max over anybody else, it was the same with Mercedes back in the day. Lewis was prioritized over Nico Rosberg, always was, and if Nico was still around, Lewis would still be getting prioritized. Mercedes was built around Lewis. That's kind of changing now, I think. I think George challenges him quite a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of either of those guys. I know I've said that before. But it is a team that's kind of being built that way. Red Bull, I do understand Red Bull has been built around Max, okay? Like, I'm not that naive. And coming from a Max Verstappen fan, like, I understand that there is a certain bias towards him, but in the same vein, Checo is in the same car and just doesn't pull the performances out of it that Max does. And I think that says a lot about Max as a driver. And it's not just the car. There was a moment early on in the race, which it was short-lived, but there was a moment a little bit early on in the race where Daniel overtook Lando in the McLaren, and it was a little bit satisfying, like oddly satisfying. Would have been more oddly satisfying if it was Oscar, but Daniel, overtaking Lando, I enjoyed that. And that's coming from someone, again, that is both a Lando fan and a Daniel Ricciardo fan. But it was quite, I was just kind of like, yeah, great. And again, I know that those two are friends. They fly places together. Thank you, Instagram. We love these photos that those boys posted. Aston's pace was just gone. And speaking of pace just being gone, it was also the case for McLaren. McLaren set their car up for a wet race. That was why the boys did so well in the sprint and in qualifying, because it was wet. But in the dry, the car just wasn't set up for the dry. So there wasn't really that competition from them to be in podium places in the feature race. But again, that's what happens. It's different setups. They were set up for a wet race. It didn't happen. We were hoping that we were maybe going to get rain towards the end and then they would have been able to improve, but it just didn't happen. The Astons, like, their pace was also just kind of gone. Like, I don't know what's happened. I said this before. I don't know what's happened down at Aston Martin. They have been saying that it was one of their upgrades that actually made things worse, not made it better, and they're going to be looking at it over the summer break. So hopefully we come back to the Netherlands in a couple of weeks and see an improvement there. Because, like, Fernando was struggling to overtake, K-Mag and Nico Hülkenberg in their Haas. Again, nothing against Nico and Kevin. I'm a big Nico fan. I love Haas and I love Gunther Steiner. But Haas is still always going to kind of be one of those back markers. However, both of those drivers do tend to pull out some amazing performances and get so much out of those cars that you never thought was possible. Ferrari made a good stop during the race. They did a good pit stop with Charles. I nearly fell off my couch while I was watching because I was like, holy crap, they did a good pit stop. Especially when their pit stops in Hungary weren't very good. It was an overall good weekend for Alpine. Again, we had Pierre in P3 in the sprint race. And then I believe in the race they were both... Esteban was 8th and Pierre was 11th. And it was very close between him and Yuki. It was about 3.5 seconds. So there was that. And it was just... It was good to see both the Alpines finish both the races. And Esteban being in the points in the feature race was also, I do enjoy watching both of those guys. I think they're both still, I want to say they're both still young. They are in kind of like, if you watch the F1 Grill the Grid, Max is the 9th youngest. And then all the other drivers like Pierre and Esteban are older than him. So I say the younger drivers, but they are both still do have potential. And if Alpine could kind of just get their things together and get all their ducks in a row. That would be great. And I did make a little joke at the end of my notes. I did say Charles podium, woo! So Charles being P3. And that's, sprint weekends and Charles Leclerc, they just go together. He's podiumed in sprint races the whole season. Have we had 2 or 3 sprint races now? I think we've only had 2 in Baku and here, and he was on pole in Baku and was on the podium in Baku and on the podium in Spa. And then my little joke to kind of end my wrap up of Belgium was that trophies were safe from Lando Norris destruction. However, we say that they were safe from Lando Norris destruction, and they were. And then Red Bull destroyed Max's trophy anyway. At the end of the race, when they've got their pit board out and they do they take a photo and then they all run and celebrate and do champagne. The pit board crushed Max's trophy and destroyed it. They were able to piece it back together and glue it back together, and it was fine. But I thought it was quite funny that it was like, it's safe from Lando. Oh, lol jokes. We're gonna destroy it anyway. It's just funny. Congratulations, Red Bull, on destroying your own trophy. Now, this year, during silly season of the summer, which we haven't really got much of a silly season. This time last year, we had Seb getting Instagram, Seb announcing his retirement, I cried, Fernando moving to Aston Martin, and we had the famous Oscar Piastri tweet. Oscar Piastri tweet. This one. This tweet. The Alpine tweet. And so far this silly season, we've had nothing. Nothing really. We've had rumors flying that Carlos has signed a pre-contract with Audi for 2025, 2026, 2025? 2025, I think. And there was also a rumor going around that Lando signed a pre-contract with Ferrari, which personally I would love to see. I would love to see Charles and Lando at Ferrari. I'd actually like to see Lando at Ferrari and Charles at Red Bull, but that's never going to happen. Or even Lando at Red Bull, which again, I don't think is going to happen. And then the only kind of other thing that sort of caught my eye about silly season this time around was the fact that that apparently AlphaTauri are going to be using the RB19 next year as their car. Which, if that does happen, wow, that's going to be great. I think that could be quite interesting, actually, seeing what the AlphaTauri drivers can do with the RB19 next year. And speaking of, now, this may take me a moment, so Trent, if I take too long, please cut this. I'm definitely going to take too long because I need to go back and look at it properly. The out of contract drivers, just give me one moment. I found it. Okay. Speaking of next year and drivers who are out of contract, there is a fair few of them. Hamilton, we don't know if he's re-signed a contract yet. Lance Stroll I don't believe he's re-signed a contract yet, but his dad owns the team, so I don't see him going anywhere. Both Yuki and Daniel are out of contract at AlphaTauri at the end of this season. I think it will all depend on how Daniel performs in the rest of the season, whether or not he gets to keep that seat next year. Hopefully he does. Both Nico and Kevin are out of contract at the end of this year. Zhou Guanyu is out of contract at the end of this year, although I think it's been confirmed in the last couple of days that his has been extended. And Logan Sargent's contract is up at the end of this year as well. Now, I think there is a very high likelihood, and it's unfortunate because I do love Logan, that he will probably not be in the Williams next year. I hope he is. I don't think he will be. I've got a couple predictions in terms of that. I think maybe we could see Mick Schumacher back in, especially with the way that Toto has kind of been pushing him and babysitting him and being very protective of Mick. I'd love to see him get another chance. I don't know what's going to happen at Haas. Who knows? We could end up with Daniel Ricciardo there. I don't think he will go there, not with the AlphaTauri seat now. We might see some new kids coming along, or maybe some old kids coming back. But, who knows? Someone was talking about Audi in 2025 today, and my suggestions there were I would love to see an experienced driver there. If Carlos does go there, I think it would be really good for the team to have a leader like that. And then coming up, maybe, there's a couple of F2 drivers that have proven themselves this season, especially. Fred Vesti is one of those. However, he is part of the Mercedes family, so you don't really know what's going to happen there. It would be great to see him in the Haas, maybe. Or him in a Williams. He was leading the championship for most of this year. He has been overtaken now, though, by Teo Porcher, who would also be great to see in the Audi. And then there's Ollie Behrman as well. Now, Ollie Behrman is freshly 18, so he has quite a while to kind of mature and grow as a driver before they get him in an F1 car. And I really hope there's a seat for him soon, because he does deserve it. It's only Arthur Leclerc's first season in F2, being bumped up from F3 at the end of last year. So I don't see him getting an F1 seat anytime soon, although it would be kind of funny if he absolutely just smashes it out of the park next year and we end up with Charles and Arthur both at Ferrari. However, I don't think that will happen. As great it would be, as it would be. Now, that is the end of the episode for today. So thank you guys so much for coming to hang out with me. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can. My username is @Kelsey_139. I believe the picture of me that comes up has my face. And I am the Aussie Grid Girl on Twitter. It does mention music journalism and F1. Music journalism is my other job, one of the many that I have. You guys can also come and find me on TikTok at Little Rockin' Emo. It's all one word. Little as in like small, Little. Rockin' as in if the car is a rockin', don't come a knockin', ROCKIN, and then emo, EMO. That is my username over on TikTok if you want to come hang out with me. I am going to do a day in the life. I will do it as a day in the life of a content creator, as an F1 content creator. And I'll show you guys kind of what goes into what I research before I come in and talk about the things that I talk about on here, and kind of how my day sort of, is put together over race weekends. If that's something you guys would be interested in, I'm definitely down for filming that. If you have any other suggestions, you can put them in the comments below, or you can tweet me them. You can message me on TikTok, I believe, or you can message me on Instagram. I believe my Instagram handle is the Aussie Grid Girl. It is all linked into my Twitter anyway, so if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to find my other links. And I am the Aussie Grid Girl on Threads as well, if people are still using that. So thank you guys again for coming to hang out with me. Thank you, Aaron, for recording my intro and my outro music. And always, Trent, thank you for editing all of this footage and making me look good and helping me out with that. I really appreciate you. Everybody give claps for Trent and Aaron for being my my secret helpers and the people that I owe most of my success to in terms of this podcast. Now I'm just being modest. It is mostly me. But I am super grateful for the people in my life that help me out with this. And I have thoroughly enjoyed recording again, and I will see you guys after Zandvoort. And I hope you all look after yourselves and be good to each other. I'll see you soon. Bye.